So, moving on from the last video, we just talked about the first couple of questions under the domestic adoption only. Now we're going to move on to the second one. Again, there's a little box by it, so you're going to mark on there after you have discussed that with the adoptive family. It says, whether pursuing domestic or international adoption, there are risks related to the adoption process. Some of the risks related to domestic adoption include, but are not limited to, inaccurate referral information, unnamed birth fathers, the birth parents changing their mind, the ICPC processing hurdles, and the list goes on. So you are going to tell the adoptive family that. You are going to say those words, put them in your own words, but you're going to say those words. Quick side note for anyone that's not familiar with the term ICPC, if a child is crossing state lines during their adoption process, going bio moms in one state, adoptive families in another state, ICPC stands for the Interstate Compact on the Placement of Children. Every state has an ICPC office, and those offices have to give approval for the child to cross state lines. And so the family has to stay in Kentucky if that's where bio mom is and that's where child was born. They have to stay in Kentucky until the ICPC states have approved the placement, and then they get to go home. So we do have hurdles in that sometimes where documents are missing, or they have concerns, or they have questions. But the domestic coordinator, myself, or whoever would be handling the case would talk to the adoptive family about that ahead of time. If and when your family is placed with one of these anticipated obstacles, how do you anticipate navigating that? Again, ask for help from their caseworkers. That's going to be an answer to a lot of these questions. You know, we're going to look to our caseworker for support. We're going to have them help us. We're going to talk to them. And even though that can be a simple Sunday school answer, it's a good answer because that's the answer. We do want them to ask the agency, but we also want them to get thinking about, okay, this isn't going to be a fluid, smooth process. There's going to be hurdles. There's going to be speed bumps along the way, and we just need to be prepared for that. The next little blurb on here, again, this is going to be what the caseworker is saying down here. Specifically discuss with the family the possibility of a birth parent changing their mind even after placement of the child if parental rights are not yet terminated. Ensure the family is educated that this does occasionally occur, and discuss any fears or concerns that they have about this. This happens. It's part of domestic adoption is that we do have these disruptions in placement that occur. I feel like we see them rarely because I feel like we work really well with our birth mothers ahead of time to ensure that they are very confident in their decision. But we still see this happen. And so, one, we want the parents to be very realistic that they know this is a possibility. Two, we want them to have thought about it as a possibility and thought and discussed with each other what they would do if this happened. And three, we just want them to know that we're here to support them and for them to know what they feel like they would do if this would happen. This question might make them have some questions about differing states because every state has differing laws in regards to when parental rights are terminated. And so when you ask this question, they might give you a slew of questions, you know, well, when are rights terminating in Kentucky, and when are rights terminating in Tennessee, and when are rights terminating in Missouri and Indiana, and it's difficult, of course, for you to know each state's laws in regards to that. And so you can tell them that they can email Maria. They can ask Maria those questions because I have all the state laws. So you can refer them to me if you would like to as the domestic coordinator to help ascertain what the different state laws are because every state is different. So the question on the next page that goes with that is, how can ABI best support you if a birth parent changes their mind and a placement is disrupted? We want to be a support, and some people want some time to themselves where they don't really want us talking to them and you know, bothering them. They need to remove themselves from the adoption process for a month while they grieve this loss and they move on. And then we have some people that really want us there and want us walking through it with them and talking to them daily. So we need to know how to best support them in this type of situation. And we want them to know we're there for them, to support them. The next section is on the level of openness in adoption. I'm going to take a drink real quick. The level of openness in adoption. Basically, within domestic adoption, there are 3 types of levels of openness. There is a closed adoption, a semi-open adoption, and a fully open adoption. Those are the 3 types, but they vary in measure. So I'm just going to go through this, and then I'll talk about them some more. It says, explain the recent cultural changes in that 40 years ago, almost all adoptions were closed. Closed meaning there's no contact between the adoptive family and the biological family. After the adoption, they don't know, they might know each other's first names, but that's it. They don't know address, they don't know phone number, they have no additional information on one another. That's a closed adoption. So 40 years ago, almost all adoptions were closed. Presently, closed adoptions rarely occur. It is ABI's policy, we don't allow closed adoptions. Even if a birth mother isn't interested in receiving contact, we still require the adoptive family to send our agency letters and pictures. That way, if 10 years down the road a birth mother would come and wonder how her child's doing, we can give her those letters and pictures. So that would be considered semi-open, but we don't allow closed adoptions. We don't allow the adoptive family to just kind of fall off the face of the earth and not have any contact whatsoever after the adoption. Many of the birth mothers we work with request open adoptions and direct contact with the adoptive family. The majority of our cases are that. Every case except one this past year has been a fully open adoption. And so many of our birth mothers request open adoptions. Educate the family on the strengths of a semi-open or open adoption, that it can be a healthier dynamic for all individuals involved. It can provide the child with a knowledge of their personal history. It can also provide them as the adoptive parents with answers, or it can provide the child with answers as to why the biological parents chose to make an adoption plan. It can ease the understanding of their adoption story as they grow older and are able to either discuss it directly with their biological parents or gather information through letters. It can also be a healthy option for the biological parents. Some of the fears of biological parents include that the child will not understand why they made the adoption plan, that the child will hate them for it, or that the child will not be cared for properly by the adoptive family. I've heard birth mothers say all of those things. So they're really concerned about how the child is going to process this adoption later on and how the child's going to feel about them as their biological parents. A semi-open or open adoption provides the biological parents with assurance that they made a positive decision for their child, and they can have interaction with the adoptive family to ease their fears. Semi-open and open adoptions can also be very healthy for the adoptive parents, as it provides them with a connection to their child's history. If medical or mental health issues come up down the road, they have a resource in the biological family. Helping facilitate a relationship between their child and their child's biological parents can also be a strong point of connection for the adoptive parents and their child, strengthening their relationship with one another. I love cases where the child reaches an age where they want to learn more about their biological parents, and their adoptive parents come alongside them and say, yes, absolutely, I will help you with this, I will go through this with you, we'll do this together, and I'm here to support you through it. That exemplifies a really strong relationship between a child and their adoptive parents. So, after you have talked to them about the varying levels, and also let me say this in regards to semi-open, I already explained closed adoption means there's no contact. A fully open adoption means there's direct contact between the adoptive parents and the biological parents, whether it's through Facebook, through text messaging, through letters and pictures, or even visits. Open means there's direct contact between the two of them. Semi-open is somewhere in between, and it varies. Semi-open basically means there is contact between the adoptive family and the biological family, but it's not directly. We facilitate it as an agency. So, for example, the adoptive family sends a picture and letter updates to the biological parents, but first they send it to our agency, and our agency sends it to the biological family, and vice versa. That way they haven't exchanged addresses and phone numbers and maybe even last names. Like there isn't that personal information shared, but they can still have contact with one another. It's also good for the adoptive family to know that this relationship evolves over time. I've had cases that started out closed and then moved to semi-open and then eventually moved to fully open. I've had cases where it was semi-open, where it was just letters and pictures for 16 years. I had a case, and then when the kids turned 16, they decided, okay, we want to do visits now. Everyone decided on that together. We would like to do some visits and to get together now that the girls were mature enough to handle that emotionally and process through that. So we've seen a lot of healthy semi-open and open adoptions. Adoptive parents are a lot of times worried about the mental health and stability of the biological parents. And I always tell the adoptive family, we're here to assist with that. If we have major concerns about a biological mother, we're going to be open and honest, and we're going to help you establish boundaries, and we're going to let you know what our concerns are, and we're going to help you through that, because that's a lot of times the adoptive parent's concern. So then your follow-up questions for that are, how do you feel about the prospect of having a semi-open or open relationship with your child's biological family? You'll have families that love it, that they're excited about that and having that connection, and then you're going to have families that are very leery of that and not comfortable with that. And so it's just important for us to know and help them kind of process through their emotions and see where they're at. What questions do you have about the level of openness of an adoption? If they ask you questions that you're not comfortable answering or you don't feel qualified to answer, then you can refer them to me and I would be happy to talk to them. At this time, do you desire to have a semi-open or open adoption with the biological family? So we need them to say to you whether they want semi-open or open. If they want closed, then they need to be working with another agency, not us, because again, we don't allow closed, and I tell all of our families that up front, so that shouldn't come as a surprise. They should know we don't allow closed, we only allow semi-open or open adoption. And a lot of families will say, I'm comfortable with semi-open, I'm comfortable with open on a case-by-case scenario, which a lot of our families say, and that's completely understandable because every case is different. So how do you anticipate addressing your child's questions about their personal history and curiosity regarding biological parents? Again, this is just to get him thinking, because it's going to happen. Our son just recently started asking more and more questions, and it's at the most inopportune time when we're not ready for him. But they come, and it's going to happen sooner than you think. I didn't think Silas would start asking at 3 and 4 years old, but he has. So they need to be prepared for that. How do you intend on sharing your child's adoption story with them as they grow? Some people do scrapbooks. Some people do it verbally, telling their child their adoption story. But the key is just to make it evolve with them. Only give them age-appropriate information, only answer the specific questions that they're asking, and give them a little bit at a time. And as they grow older and older, the story evolves into what it fully is. So a little bit at a time is usually how the adoption story grows and how you share it with your child over time. So, I'm going to take a pause before we move on to the international adoption only case scenario questions.